Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my movie vlog. My name is John Campea, and this special video on a piece of news that just broke a little over an hour ago. According to the magazine Deadline, Deadline is right now reporting that they have received confirmation that Quentin Tarantino has pitched an idea for a new Star Trek film to JJ Abrams, and that Paramount Studios and JJ Abrams, as a result, are going to be assembling a writer's room to see if they can flesh out his idea into a motion picture, with the idea that Quentin Tarantino then himself would actually direct the film. Now, without going into it too much, let's take the exact wording from Deadline itself. Mike Fleming wrote this. He wrote, "Already busy preparing to direct the film he just set up at Sony Pictures, Quentin Tarantino is also planning to boldly go where he has not gone before. Sources said that Tarantino has come up with a great idea for a Star Trek movie at Paramount. After sharing his idea with JJ Abrams, who himself is busy preparing for Star Wars Episode 9, I've heard the plan is to assemble a writer's room of scribes who will hear Tarantino's take and begin to put together a movie. If it all works out, Tarantino might direct it, with JJ Abrams himself producing." This is crazy. Okay, let's just get that out of the way. This is absolutely nuts. Now, of course, Quentin Tarantino is one of the greatest filmmakers of our generation. There's no question about that. Some even like to debate his place amongst the greatest directors of all time. But he's always done his own original films. But as he approaches film number 9, which is the working title right now, for his film that's going to be set in the 60s and 70s with Sharon Tate and the Marilyn Manson murders set somewhere in Marilyn Manson, with the Manson murders, with the Manson murders set in the background of it, that they've already offered a role to Margot Robbie. They're going after apparently Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Leonardo DiCaprio. This looks to be a star-studded affair that has been picked up at Sony Pictures. But apparently once he's done that, he might be looking to expand his horizons and go where, as they said, no Quentin Tarantino has gone before, which is to jump onto an existing franchise. This is something he has never done in his storied history. Now, I'm going to give some thoughts on this, but I'm doing this live specifically because I want to hear your guys' reaction. I'm sure you guys have some really interesting opinions about this. Do me a favor, if you have an opinion or a thought about this, jump onto Twitter and tweet to me right now at John Campea. Once again, just jump on Twitter and tweet to me at John Campea. Start off your tweet with at John Campea, send it in to me, and just a couple of minutes, I'm going to go and take your thoughts, opinions, and points of view on this. But first, here's my thoughts on this. Quentin Tarantino has always been such a unique voice in the world of film. His fingerprints are all over his movie. When you watch a Quentin Tarantino movie, you don't have to see the credits to know it's a Quentin Tarantino movie. He's always been very dedicated to writing and doing his own stuff, coming up with his own ideas, very original. I think the idea, now that he's ending, according to him, now that he's approaching the end of his career, whether that'll be after 1 more movie, 2 more movies, 3 more movies, 4 more movies, whatever, he's saying he's approaching the end of his career. As Tarantino approaches the end of his career, the idea to see him do something that we have not seen him do before, in other words, jumping onto a franchise and seeing what he can do when it's not something that was totally created out of his own imagination right from scratch. Can he jump onto an existing mythology? Can Quentin Tarantino jump onto an existing story and pick it up and carry it the next 10 yards? Is he capable of doing that? Now, I'm sure as a director he is, but maybe this is something that he, at this point in his career, wants to prove, one, to himself, maybe prove it to his fans, maybe prove it to, I don't know, some film school professor said he could never do it, but I really think probably more than anything else, this is probably an issue of Quentin Tarantino maybe wanting to prove it to himself. And maybe he's he is a Star Trek fan. So maybe the idea of him stepping into that universe as he nears, according to him, the end of his career is something that really appeals to him. Now, right now, I've got a super chat just came in from Ryan Butler, and Ryan Butler is writing, "Hey John, I'm a media arts major learning video editing, camera work, and line production, directing, and more." And he's basically asking about media jobs and stuff like that. Thank you a lot for the super chat, Ryan. Unfortunately, right now we're talking about Quentin Tarantino at the moment and what he's doing with Star Trek. So the notion that he would step on to another existing property is, number one, something that probably a lot of us film fans never thought we would see. Now, come on, be honest. You never really thought we would see Quentin Tarantino direct the next Fast and the Furious movie, or direct the next Star Trek movie, or direct the next whatever Rocky movie, or direct the next Star Wars movie. Like, we never thought we would see him do that. But according to this report, if it's accurate, that might be what's in the cards at this point. So listen, guys, once again, I want to take your thoughts and opinions. That's what I'm most interested in here. So once again, send out a tweet to me simply at John Campea. Get your thoughts in here, and let's see what you guys have to say to this. All right, with that out of the way, let's go to your live Twitter questions right now. And we'll start with the first live tweet. It comes to us from Metalhead9017, who writes, yes, an R-rated Star Trek. Well, I have very little doubt that regardless of if Quentin Tarantino ends up directing this thing, and if it actually all happens, I have very, very little doubt that Paramount Pictures would not allow Star Trek to be rated R. I'm pretty confident that Paramount is very protective of this property, and I do not think they would let it be rated R. And you know what? If Quentin Tarantino is as big as a Star Trek fan as we hear he is, he's probably not aiming to make an R-rated Star Trek anyway. Quentin Tarantino is a great filmmaker. Let's not pigeonhole him and say anything Quentin Tarantino does has to be rated R. Let's not put him in that little box. Let's assume for a second that he's a talented enough filmmaker that he can work outside of those parameters and do something like a Star Trek movie that isn't rated R. So I think he'd probably be able to do that. Well, let's see. This next one comes to us from Steve Hall 815, who writes, John, do you think this film will actually come to fruition, or is it just smoke that will fizzle out? Hey, look, at this point, even if this report is accurate from Deadline, and even if it is 100% accurate that Tarantino did come up with an idea, and he did pitch it to JJ, and JJ took it to Paramount, and they are putting this writer's room together, even if all of that is 100% accurate, lots of movies have the idea stage and then never actually make it to the screen. So this report could be 100% and not actually happen. So if I had to set an over-under number right now on us actually getting this Star Trek movie that they're talking about and it actually coming to the screen, like, let's not even worry about whether Tarantino will direct it or not. Whether or not they take Tarantino's idea and turn it into a movie, I'll set that at 30%. The over-under on if Tarantino himself actually ends up directing this thing, I will drop that 30% down to 15%. But look, even at 15%, you're hearing that number, 15%, John, that's incredibly low. Sure. But even at that number, at 15%, that is incredibly high. That is incredibly high compared to what we thought. Like, if you had asked me yesterday, John, said, John, set an over-under. What do you think the chances are that a Quentin Tarantino will ever direct a Star Trek movie? I would have set the over-under number at 1%. 1%. Today, though, it's 15%. So it's possible, if it's already gotten this far, again, if this report is accurate, and it's already gotten as far as Tarantino pitching it, JJ and Paramount liking enough that they're assembling a writer's room, that means it's got a life to it. It's got a heartbeat. And we could actually see this happen. I mean, it's just, to me, I still haven't wrapped my head around this thing. I've been sitting on this for about an hour, and I still have not wrapped my head around this whole notion that Quentin Tarantino could actually, in some form of reality, actually direct a Star Trek film. That's just nuts to me. I've got a super chat in here from Andrew Gifford, and Andrew Gifford is writing, does this affect Star Trek 4 with Pine/Hemsworth? Now, for those of you who don't know what he means by that, shortly after the last Star Trek movie came out, Paramount and JJ Abrams announced that they already had their idea for the next Star Trek movie, and it would include George Kirk, of course, Captain Kirk's father, played by Chris Hemsworth in the first JJ Star Trek film. So clearly there'd be some kind of time travel, whatever involved, but they said we're going to have Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pine both in that movie. Whether this idea by Quentin Tarantino piggybacks on that and incorporates that idea, or whether or not this idea by Quentin Tarantino is a totally separate idea, I'll be honest with you. If I had to guess, My guess would be that this would probably be a new idea. That's my guess. I have nothing to base that on. It's just my guess. And if that's the case, it would probably replace whatever idea that they had going with Chris Hemsworth. Personally, I love the idea of seeing Captain Kirk's dad brought back in, played by Chris Hemsworth, have that dynamic with the two Chris's on screen. I think that could be a lot of fun. So I'm hoping that Tarantino's idea includes that, but we just don't know. And if I had to give my best guess is probably that it's a brand new idea. That's my thought anyway. All right, let's go to the next tweet. And the next live tweet from you guys comes to us from Raymond Mondvirata, who writes, John, will Tarantino use the current cast or his stable of actors? Who would you like to see on Quentin's Trek film? It would have to be the existing cast. Has to be the existing cast. I do not think they're looking to reboot the entire Star Trek franchise again, especially after coming off. Now, the last one didn't do great financially. Let's just call it what it is. It did not do great financially, but I believe the last film was the best one they've done yet. And I thought the last one was the best example of amalgamating the old Star Trek, you know, the spirit of the old television Star Trek with the new concept of Star Trek. I thought it did a great job of that, and they've got some momentum going. I do not think they're looking at rebooting an entire brand new universe. So I would have to assume that they're going to use the existing cast. Now, that doesn't mean there's not room then to bring in, you know, a Christoph Waltz or Walton Goggins or some other, you know, staples, Samuel Jackson, some other staples of Quentin Tarantino films. Nothing precludes that, but I don't think you're going to see any of these old Quentin Tarantino standby actors come in and replace existing cast members. I don't think that's the way they're going. You never know. You never know. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. All right. Sith El Tachi writes, John, is there a chance for Kill Bill Volume 3? I doubt it. It doesn't sound like that's what Quentin Tarantino has on his radar right now, especially since he's got this film number 9 on his plate. If he is indeed looking to doing Star Trek, it sounds like he's probably moved beyond the Kill Bill stuff at this point. Let's see. This next tweet comes to us from John Wicks Beer, who's writing, John, I like him doing sci-fi, but would have preferred it if it was his full creative control and rated R. But again, that's just what he's always done. What really is exciting to me about this is the notion of seeing Tarantino step outside of his comfort zone. Because Tarantino, for better or for worse, and the results have been fantastic, but his entire career, he's lived in that comfy little box. His own films done his way, no problem. I love the idea of seeing him step outside of his comfort zone, really stretch himself as a director, working within an existing franchise, to just see him do it because he's never done it before. There's something fascinating about that to me that I really want to see him do and see how he can handle something like that when it's just not all his 100% control, do whatever you want to do, when there are existing mythologies that he's got to work within. Because, you know, you take something like Inglourious Bastards. There was no existing mythology that he had to work within. He took the existing history of World War II and just turned it completely on its head and did whatever he wanted to do. With something like Star Trek, there are existing mythologies that he'd have to work within certain parameters. That's where you see how really creative somebody can be. Real creativity shows itself when there are limitations around. And I'm just dying to see what Quentin Tarantino can do here. All right, another super chat just came in from Angel Chang, who writes, Simon Pegg with Tarantino's words will be epic. Of that, I have no doubt. And you know what? Simon Pegg actually wrote the screenplay for the last Star Trek movie, which I already mentioned, thought was probably the best one they've done so far. I really enjoyed what he did with that. Imagine Simon Pegg working on a script with Quentin Tarantino. That could just be outside. Could be a car wreck, absolutely. Could be an absolute car wreck, but it could be something really special too. All right, you guys keep pouring in the tweets. Here's the next one. The next tweet comes to us from B by Isaac, who writes, John, never been a Trekkie, always been a Star Wars guy, but I may see a Tarantino-directed Star Trek film. You know what? You're not the only one. That's one of the other fascinating aspects of this. I think there are people out there who do not consider themselves Star Trek fans, probably have never checked out a Star Trek movie or one of the Star Trek TV shows. But you now tell those people that, oh, it's a Star Trek movie, but it's directed by Quentin Tarantino, based on an idea by Quentin Tarantino. that would bring in an entire new swath of potential Star Trek fans. First of all, it'll appeal to existing Star Trek fans because you got one of the greatest directors of all time coming to do one of your movies. That will get the base excited. Then you compound that with the fact that you're going to bring in eyeballs that have never bothered to watch a Star Trek film before, but they are Quentin Tarantino fans and they'll come and check this out. This could be a total car wreck, absolutely. But it could be something really special at the same time. I'm really curious to see how this kind of works out. Okay, not everybody's excited. This new tweet comes to us from Rob Lewis 1157. Says, "Dear God, stop the madness. Hell no." And you know what? When you talk about something as out of the box as this, when you talk about something as unexpected as this, there's going to be a lot of excitement, but it's also going to strike some fear into some people. Some people may feel that Quentin Tarantino, his style is too far outside of the Star Trek style. Some Quentin Tarantino fans will maybe hate the idea of Tarantino doing something that he hasn't done before, doing something like working within an existing mythology. That's not what Tarantino does. This will scare some people. But whenever you're being asked to step outside your comfort zone, it's scary. And it's totally understandable that it'll scare some Quentin Tarantino fans. It'll scare some Star Trek fans. That's totally natural. Nothing wrong with that. But I think the amount of excitement this could potentially generate will probably far outshadow a lot of the fear that other people may have. Okay, let's try this one. This one comes to us from Duan Allen, who writes, John, is Paramount Pictures pushing Tarantino due to the downfall of their films? I don't think so. Look, every studio is in the market to work with Quentin Tarantino. Paramount was one of the studios when Tarantino was leaving Weinstein, and he basically put out a free-for-all saying, who wants to take on my next film, my film number 9, based in the 60s and 70s around Sharon Tate and the Manson murders, who wants it? There was a bidding war. Paramount was one of the studios, because every studio wants to work. I think Disney was the only studio that wasn't interested in it, but every other studio was, including Paramount. Everybody wants to work with Quentin Tarantino. Everybody wants to say their studio's got that. So this has nothing to do with the recent success or failure of certain Paramount films. This is just, hey, they want to do it. They've got a title that Tarantino seems to like in Star Trek. Tarantino had an idea. Now maybe see if they can make something happen. Let's see. This one comes to us from Green Eyed Blues, writes, John, wasn't there a rumor that Quentin Tarantino was in talks to direct Casino Royale? I don't remember that myself. Possibly, maybe you guys heard it too. Jump into the comment section and answer that question. Let us know if you think that's the truth. All right. This one comes to us from Jorge Goomer, who writes, John, what about the Vega brothers? Could he produce it for another director? I don't think Quentin Tarantino would be interested in somebody else directing a Vega brothers movie. And I've never really thought that was ever going to really come to full fruition. So, but even if it were, that's something probably Tarantino would want to do himself. I'm just guessing. I'm just assuming he wouldn't want to see another director direct that. Even if it was somebody who he was friends with, like an Eli Roth or something. I think that's something he'd want to do himself. Not totally sure, but I think so. Let's see. This next one. Oh, this is interesting. Sith Al-Taji writes, will Tarantino go digital? Look, Tarantino is one of these last remaining, sticking his heels in the dirt saying, I shoot only my movies on film. I don't shoot on digital. With a Star Trek, look, you can shoot it on film. Sci-fi films have shot on film. So look, let's put it this way. If the last fence between Quentin Tarantino directing a Star Trek film or not directing a Star Trek film was Tarantino insisting he wanted to shoot it on film, let him shoot it on film. Look, if he's going to be a dinosaur for the rest of his career, he's going to totally think that way. He's going to think of the 70s and the 80s and the way they shot film back there. And you know what? That's fine. If that's the medium that he's comfortable with, there's nothing wrong with that. Just let him do it. I highly doubt Paramount or anybody is going to say to him, no, you have to shoot it digital. If he wants to shoot it on film, let him shoot it on film. No skin off anybody's nose. But that is an interesting question. It would be interesting if a Star Trek film became the first film that Quentin Tarantino decided to shoot digitally, and catch up with the 2000s a little bit. If he decided to shoot it digitally, that would be kind of interesting if that's the way that turned out. Let's see. Let's go on. I'll just take time for a couple more here. This one comes to us with something that's crossed my mind as well. Lee Brockway writes, John, does Tarantino taking on this project likely postpone his retirement? I think so. Because if he already had a couple of other films in mind, I have a feeling him doing this Star Trek movie, if it happens, would kind of just postpone off those other films. I don't think he'd cancel those other films or get rid of those ideas out of his head. So I think if he does end up getting into the Star Trek world, that will delay his retirement. I'm just guessing. I'm not basing that on anything. That's just my guess. Let's see. Let's try this one. This one comes to us from Official Amian, who writes, John, what would you think if this same news, but it was Star Wars? I'll be honest with you. If you came to me before this news came out and said, John, would you like Quentin Tarantino directing a Star Wars film? I'll be honest with you. My first reaction would be, I don't see that as a fit. I don't see it as a fit. It wouldn't be my first choice, but he is one of the great directors of our generation. He is arguably in the conversation of one of the top 5, 6, or 7 greatest directors of all time. And I always say adding talent is never a mistake. So while he would not necessarily be my first choice to run out and grab as a director for a Star Wars film, if they announced that he was directing a Star Wars film, as a lifelong Star Wars fan, you're damn right I'd be interested. Not my first choice, but just think about the possibilities. Look, I remember Kevin Feige once told me, I asked Kevin Feige once, about James Gunn. James Gunn had only ever done these small, little, low-budget things before he got hired on to do Guardians of the Galaxy. And I brought that up to Kevin, and I said, was there any apprehension? The biggest budget thing he ever did was Slither. So were you concerned about that? And what Kevin said has always stuck with me. He said, somebody who's great at telling stories is great at telling stories. Doesn't matter if it's big budget, little budget, or whatever. And that has always stuck with me. Quentin Tarantino, he may not be a Star Wars guy. I may not see him as a big sci-fi guy, but you know what? He's a great storyteller. He tells great stories. And a great storyteller is a great storyteller. So I would be interested to see what he would bring to something like a Star Wars, if that were the case. A special thanks to ZRJRO in the chat board there, who put in a super chat. Without a comment, just put in a super chat. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. And let's see. Last question I'll take via Twitter. This one comes to us from Mr. Bieber Star, who writes, John, do you think this will cause it to make more money than previous Star Trek installments at the box office? Tough to say just on its face value. We would have to, first of all, hear what the movie's about. We'd have to see the marketing in the trailers. Do they generate buzz? Look, there's obviously going to be a lot of buzz around this. If this ever does come to fruition, and we don't know whether it will or not, but if this does come to fruition, there's already automatically going to be a lot of buzz. There's clearly going to be buzz surrounding a Quentin Tarantino-directed Star Trek film, no doubt. Will that then generate into positive buzz or negative buzz? It really all depends on the direction we hear that the movie's going in and the marketing for it. On its surface, all other things being equal, more buzz equals more money, so I'll go out on a limb and say yes. I'll just go out on a wild limb here and say yes. Well, listen, guys, that will do it for me for this quick video talking about this breaking news that Quentin Tarantino has talked to JJ Abrams and Paramount about an idea for Star Trek. They are apparently assembling a writer's room to see what they can make happen with the possibility of a Quentin Tarantino then directing the film. This is nuts. Once again, let me direct you over to Deadline, where this exclusive story has been dropped. Again, Mike Fleming is the one who wrote it up. Go check that out there over on Deadline and get your thoughts on it. And again, guys, jump into the comment section here. I'm dying to hear your thoughts, your opinions, your reaction. Are you a Star Trek fan? If so, does the notion of this excite you? Or does it cause a little bit of fear and anxiety in you? If you're a Quentin Tarantino fan, does this idea of Quentin Tarantino doing something he's never done before, stepping outside of his comfort zone and kind of stretching himself, does that excite you? Or are you like, man, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He's been doing great just making his own films. Keep that up. So are you a little bit worried about it? Jump into the comments section and let me know what you guys think about that. Anyway, guys, since you're here, make sure you click on that subscribe button. Become a subscriber to my YouTube channel. Make sure you follow me on social media. Click the thumbs up button. And once again, leave a thought in the comments section below. That'll do it for me, guys. Thanks for joining me. My name's John Campea. And until the next video, bye-bye.